And the answer is, of course. I'm hoping that while you're reading throughout the day, you're using your finger while you read. But there's a difference between your normal reading and your training. Your training, I'm always going to ask you to practice more with the fiction reading, okay? And the reason why is because if you can imagine a graph and we're charting your reading rate, and it kind of looks a little bit like an S-curve. If you know what an S-curve is, it kind of slopes up a little bit and it levels off, and maybe slopes up a little bit more and then levels off. Kind of like any kind of progress that you're making, like at the gym or anything like that. And so you're making an improvement, and then you kind of level off a little bit and you make more improvements. And so if you can imagine that going on, that's what's happening if you're charting down your reading and your fiction. Now your nonfiction or the more technical reading will never be as fast as your pleasure fiction reading, okay? Because here's the thing. When people ask you, well, how fast do you read? Most people, who have not had any kind of specialized training in the area will say, well, I read at about 200 words a minute, okay? Well, what will happen after going through this program is when people ask you, what's your reading rate, it's not so much your reading rate as it is your reading range, okay? Your reading range. Because for some things, you can maybe read it at 500 words per minute, because it's more light reading. At other things, you might need to slow down and read at 250 words per minute. And the good thing about it is you have flexibility, because flexibility is power, right? It's kind of like the person that has to, that doesn't have the training, they're forced to read 200 words a minute, everything. It's kind of like playing golf with just a putter, if you will. And so somebody who has more training has flexibility. In this metaphor, they have more clubs to choose from. Okay, but here in this instance, we'll come back to that point, is you want to record and take notes about what you're reading. Okay, because think about it, information's coming inside your mind. What I'm going to ask you to do is take that information and write it down. So it's going inside your mind and outside, if you will, your hands. And in order for that to happen, you have to do something special in between that. In terms of doing that inside your mind, at some level, you have to organize the information, maybe even personalize the information in order to be able to express it out, okay, and write it down. So, and specifically, I'm going to piggyback this with the power of questions, and I'm going to ask you to take notes on those areas of most questions, which are really the what, the who, the where, and the when. Okay, so you're taking notes. How I prefer to do it on a page is I'll actually make a grid. So I'll draw one line down the center, a vertical line, and then one line down the middle, left to right, horizontal, and you have 4 grids. And then you could kind of put like what in one quadrant, the who in another quadrant, the where in another quadrant, and the when in another quadrant or box. But however you want to organize it, the thing I want you to do is capture those key words, okay? Because we tend to think more in key words rather than long drawn out sentences. So the what again would be anything that's plot related. You're writing down things that are going on in your book, okay? And then for the who, you're jotting down and you're recording who is being mentioned in the book. Who are the main characters? Who are the secondary characters? If you know their names, then write their names. If you don't know their names, then just write down their positions or how they're described, right? And then you want to write down the where in terms of the context of where your story or your book is taking place. And then you want to write down the when. And the when specifically is, what year, what date, what time, what season, if those specifics aren't created. And what you're going to notice by recording is you're going to have to ask yourself questions. And I guarantee you're not going to know all the answers if you're asking the right questions. So on your notes, you might honestly not know when this story is taking place because you never asked yourself that question. Does that make sense? Maybe you didn't ask yourself that question, so the next time you're going through your book and you're reading, you're going to ask yourself, when is this taking place? And it's kind of like you're looking for blue, right? You're looking for blue and you start to spot blue in different places. And that's why, oh, there's a clue, there's a clue, there's a clue. And that's the process of understanding and retaining the information, okay? And then after that, once you're done doing that, and I want you to take a couple minutes and do that now. So take out a piece of paper and jot down, just for the next 60 seconds, some notes on what you read. What's going on in your story? Is there a vacation? Is there an election? Is there a trial? Is there a football game? What's going on? And it doesn't have to be in any specific order, just jot it down. Because what you're doing is you're charging that information. When I say charging, it's kind of like, imagine you're putting electrical charge around the stuff that's the building blocks of comprehension. Who are the main characters? Who are the maybe at this point, not as significant characters? Where's your story taking place? In what city? On what continent? Is it even on Earth? And then when is it taking place? Good, fantastic. And the other part, after I ask you to record, is I'm going to ask you to relate. And practically what that means is I'm going to ask you to talk for a full 4 minutes about what you just read. Okay, I'm going to ask you to talk for a full 4 minutes about your story. And the reason why this is important is going back to that image. Information is coming from a book into your eyes, being processed by your mind, right? And before, we took that information in your mind and it went out and it got expressed through your fingers and your hands by writing. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is to express it or relate it out of your mouth by verbalizing it. Because I guarantee you, when you talk about what you just read to a partner, you're not going to be talking to him or her verbatim using the author's words. Right? Because in order to do it again, you have to organize that information inside your mind and you have to personalize it, you have to imagine it, you have to emote it to be able to express it. All right? So I'm going to ask you to talk about this for a full 4 minutes, what you just read. So tell me about it now. And then even if people are looking or they happen to be there with you, I want you to do it out loud. All right? Tell me about your story. Tell me where it began. Tell me more. Good. And what else happened? And who else did that happen with? Good. Keep talking. Even when you feel like you can't, and because I want to pause this for a second, even when you feel like you have nothing else to say, it is very, very important you keep on speaking because that's where you're forcing yourself. Notice as you're going through this, you have to close your eyes or you're going through it, you really have to focus and think about and reflect on what you just read. So I want you to keep on talking and fill out this time. Who are the main characters? What do you think will happen? Tell me more. And when is this taking place? Good, and stop. So what I'd like you to do now you see the power of this, that if you had to really think about this, that's the power. In order to be able to express it out by relating and speaking about it, you had to go back and reflect about it and organize the information. Also, as you start doing this, that maybe you aren't presenting the information right in order. That one thing will remind you of, oh yeah, and then you go back and tell another part of the story. And that's absolutely okay. So even if it feels a little uncomfortable, any part of this, whether it's writing it down, whether it's relating, or if it's the reading part where I'm asking you to be able to, as your coach, you're giving me permission to really push you to be able to read faster. Even if it's creating a certain level of stress or confusion, sometimes that confusion is what precedes learning. Okay? Usually we have to feel a little bit uncertain about something to feel a certain level of certainty and a certain level of understanding. And so that's what I'm going to ask you to do. So the process we're taking you through, this week's assignment, is the first thing I'm going to ask you to do. All right? So the next practice for the next 7 days is I'm going to ask you to, number one, I'm going to ask you to do a speed practice drill, a 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, if you want, you could go back and do it with me in this session, or you could just time yourself, and you know what it is. You time yourself for 4 minutes and read, see how much you read, mark the beginning, mark the end, and then give yourself 3 minutes, and you have 3 minutes to get through the material. And then you have to do that same material in 2 minutes, and that same material in 1 minute. When you're done with that speed practice, I'm going to ask you to retest yourself for 1 minute reading, which means pick up where you left off, time yourself for 60 seconds, and then count the number of lines that you naturally read now in 60 seconds and see if there's an improvement. And for the most part, I'm expecting that to improve pretty consistently. With the exception, though, things could change. Understand that you might come to a part of the book that might be a little bit more difficult, and that would account for your reading rate. Change in your reading rate. Sometimes your current, how much energy you have will affect your reading rate. Sometimes, let's say you normally practice in the morning and you're fully alive, but this is something you're doing towards at night and you don't have quite that energy boost, and that could affect your reading rate. Maybe one of the things that could affect your reading rate also is your focus. Sometimes, let's say you've practiced and you're fully focused, there's nothing else that you're thinking of except for what's in front of you. And then other times you could be thinking about the bills or the children or the work, and then your focus is split 4 ways, which means you're probably not reading quite as quickly as you normally would. So I'm going to ask you to test yourself for 1 minute and then note how fast you're reading. And then I'm going to ask you to read for a full 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to ask you to read now. Let's say you test yourself for 1 minute. I'm going to ask you to pick up where you left off and just read for another 5 or 10 minutes using your finger. You could alternate between your left hand and your right hand, but you're underlining the words left to right, left to right. And you're reading for another 5 to 10 minutes. All right, so you're getting in your 20 minutes of practice. When you're done, the thing number 4 I'm going to ask you to do is record, which means take notes specifically on the 4 W's that we talked about. You're writing things down because you're reflecting at it, and you're recording it down. And you're writing the who, the what, the where, and the when. And you're filling in more. And it can be on a clean piece of paper, or you could just build off your current paper. Okay, if you're using the grid or a mind map, or if you're using just linear notes, just write them down. The most important thing is you're writing them down. When you're done with that, I'm going to ask you to find somebody to relate to relate and share the information that you just learned with. And you're going to talk for a full 4 minutes. Now, let me give you some distinctions here. The best situation is you're talking to a live human being. Okay, because there's something about talking to a live human being and having them have the ability to ask you questions back. It's going to really force you to really focus and concentrate and present the information in a way that's not sloppy. Okay, because What I don't want you to do is talk to yourself. Okay, because talking to yourself, it's like you're inside your own head, you're doing the sub-vocalization, and you're saying, yeah, yeah, I know this, da, 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 da. But if you're not expressing it out loud, then you're not getting the power of, or the benefit of this drill or this exercise. Okay, so you want to relate it. So at the best, it's to a live human being. If it's not, then call somebody up. Call up, pick up your cell phone, call up a friend and say, yes, I'm looking forward to seeing you for lunch, but let me take 3 minutes and 4 minutes to tell you about a book I'm reading, and then just talk about it. I'm part of this book club or taking this speed reading program, and part of my thing I committed to is to talk about what I read for 4 minutes. Just please just listen and then talk about it. So best is a live person right in front of you. If not, call somebody up. Third option, talk to your pets. If you have pets, a dog or cat, a fish, a hamster, a bird. If you have a plant, they say talk to your plant is very therapeutic, and it actually helps with the plant growing. I don't know if that's an energy thing or if it's just the carbon dioxide coming out of your mouth, and it thrives on that. But talk to a living non-human. Okay, and then if not that, then another option is talk to an inanimate object. Talk to a bottle of water, talk into a recorder. The most important thing is you're not talking to yourself. Okay, talk to me, if you will. In these assignments, talk right into the computer, or whatever player you're playing this on, and talk to me and pretend I'm there sitting next to you and say it out loud. Because again, when you have to express it out loud, then you're really going to understand, and you're going to train yourself through this read, record, relate method what real comprehension is. I'll say that again. By going through the 3 R's, by reading it, by recording it, and relating on it, it really forces you to reflect on it, if you will, and that's what the process, you're going to start training yourself to really build a representation of what it means to understand what you read. Okay? And the last thing I'm going to ask you to do, in no specific order, number 6 is chart. And chart is, I want you to capture your new rate. Remember in step number 2, I asked you to assess your current reading rate, how many words or lines per minute you're reading in 1 minute. And then I'm going to ask you to chart that or write that down, capture that number down, because again, what you measure, you can manage. All right? And that's your assignment for this week. Now, here's the good news. This is not the end. I'm going to give another bonus section here, and on the next session, which was not included, I want to give you as much as you can handle, and I have some more stuff that I want to teach. So specifically in the next session, I want to cover some advanced speed reading exercises and techniques, some really advanced speed reading techniques that I think you'll be able to appreciate. I also want to apply what you're learning here and apply it towards everyday reading. Everything from newspapers to magazines to online reading of your emails and web browsing and everything. Okay, so that's going to be an extra bonus session that we didn't advertise, but I want you to be able to have that as like a gift from us, because we really appreciate your dedication and all your hard work. So go back, make sure you do those steps for your assignment, and I will see you in the next session. Take care.